Hey, fellow readers. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Ashley.
And this is Series Sisters.
We did it.
Ew, that's a gross handshake.
What a shape.
Ooh, mystical. Mystical.
Hi.
Hi, what's new? What's old?
New? What's old? What's borrowed? What's blue?
Well, I'm getting sick. We got that influenza B up in our house.
If you get me, don't get me sick. I'll be real pissed.
Well.
Anyway.
So I'm starting to get it.
Hopefully it's not too much in there. But we haven't kissed or anything, so.
You know I don't do that.
I know.
I don't kiss.
I know. You're gross.
Anyone. Ever.
I know.
Gross. Let's see. So this is our last episode of the Immigrants.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to tell this part of it.
The conclusion.
Yeah, you'll have some conclusion.
Will I?
You'll have some closure.
I will be conclusioned.
I will be concluded.
Concluge.
Ew. Yes. Have you ever been on an aeroplane?
Yes.
What'd you think?
My most recent endeavor was very scary. There was some turbulence, and I hated it. Hated it. I would rather drive 14 fucking hours to get somewhere, even if it takes 2 or 3 days, than ride in an airplane and go through checking everything. And then you got to go through security. And every time I was just talking to my friend about this, even though we know we're not breaking the law, when we go through security, we're like, what if somebody put like a gun in my bag? Or what if someone planted some drugs on me? It's so scary. And you think that it happened. And you're like, what if I just don't know?
Have you seen Broke Down Palace?
No, because you told me that happens, and that's my nightmare.
It's a good movie.
It's Claire Danes, little baby. Baby Claire.
Baby Claire. Okay, so I take it you would not be keen to riding an airplane shortly after they were invented.
Oh, hell no.
And started
making
it.
I would be the person like, how is it even staying up in the air? That does not seem safe.
That's how I feel.
Hell no.
Dad watches a lot of those airplane crash shows. Airplane disasters.
That'll mess with your head.
Yeah. It does. All right. Do you remember what happened last week?
We're diving in. Yes. Baby Joseph is sick.
Okay.
And he gets better. But Jean's mom does not get better. And she dies.
She did.
Then they go, because he wants to build a, like, what has he called it? His Hawaiian...
It's like a
paradise
hotel
bullshit. Yeah,
resort.
He wants to do like his big cruise liners or whatever to go to Hawaii, and then there'll be a hotel, whatever. So him and Maylene go there for a while, and it's lovely. And then he says, I'm going to ask Jean for a divorce. And then he asks Jean for a divorce, and she's like, no, I'm going to take advantage of your money. Otherwise, I'll ruin you.
Yeah.
So he's stuck, and then 8 years later-ish, she's like, I fucking had it up to here.
Maylene.
Yeah. Because you're not giving me your fucking name, you loser. Because he doesn't tell her about Jean being a blackmailer. But also, who gives a shit? Just go, you know? Fang Wu resigns. There's more, but I can't.
Yeah. So that was all correct. Maylene moves to Los Angeles.
Yes, because she's going to work at the library.
And her parents went with her. And then where we left off, Dan had gotten really drunk.
Yes, and he got in a fight and crushed or fractured someone's skull and broke his scrot.
Broke the scrot. Scrote broke.
Whoop, I got that scrote broke back mountain. Scrote
Ew.
back mountain.
Ah,
I'd watch that.
that was cool.
You're welcome.
Correct. Scrote broke. Okay. So, 1927. So, I think we left off and it was 1927. So, Dan
Yeah, I
is
think
still
so.
38.
He's my age.
Jean ran into Alan.
Oh, yeah, Alan's there. Oh, and they went on that car trip, and then that guy put his hand on her leg, and she's like, I'll fuck you up, brother. And so then she asked another guy, and he took her home.
Yeah.
And Alan couldn't find the jack because he's a douche.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. I had to get that out.
She ran into Alan when she was out shopping, and it had been years since she had seen him during that bad road trip to LA. They made a lunch date to catch up. Alan told her he had heard about the fight at the speakeasy that Dan had gotten into. And Jean realized that...
Because she thought he was in an accident.
Yeah, that the car accident story had been a lie. Alan told her he heard that Dan took on 6 men, putting 2 in the hospital. She said, 6 men? Really?
Woo!
My dear Alan, what would you do if 6 men, or
That
even
P word would just run out of there.
or even 2 men attacked you?
Even one man.
Alan said, I'd yell for help. She said,
Oh,
yes,
that's so attractive.
you would.
You lame ass.
Yeah, you're a little pussy. Dan sat in his study at home in front of the fire, staring into the flames. He was engaged in a sort of introspection.
You're not supposed to do that according to Are You Afraid of the Dark? You're not supposed to look right in the middle of the flames, remember? Because then those guys can come and kill you.
Yeah, I do remember. What guys?
I don't know. They weren't firemen, but...
Anti-firemen?
And anti-firemen, yeah, the opposite.
I forgot about that.
Okay, you're welcome.
His thoughts were confused and aimless, and if he had possessed the concept, he might have been asking himself who he was and where he was. He found his memories in the flames. The moments with Mei Ling stood out most sharply. The memories stabbed painfully, yet they were real, and everything else was an illusion. He became conscious of someone else in the room and glanced up to see Jean. They discussed the bar fight, and she told Dan she found a flask in Tommy's room. She told him...
Hide that in your kid. Oh,
What?
I guess he's a grown-ass man now. He's not a kid anymore.
Tommy's like 15.
Yeah.
So it's Tommy's flask.
Yeah, yeah.
Dan didn't put it in
I
there.
was thinking he was hiding it and put it in there.
No.
Sorry.
She told him he should probably talk to Tommy about it. Dan looked at her, and even though he even though he thought she was still beautiful, the hunger for her was gone. He was empty, used up, and depleted, and his only desire was that she go away and leave him alone. Jean said, Danny, come to bed with me.
Ew, no.
Shocked, he said, just like that? Come to bed with me, Danny? How else? She said. He said, Jesus Christ, I don't know. Ask me who I am. Or do you go to bed with strangers?
She does.
She said, that's a rotten thing to say.
She also had an abortion, remember?
Yeah, she did have an abortion. Why'd you whisper it?
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh.
I was whispering it to them.
He said, okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. But
No,
you,
he has every fucking right to say that.
But you did, she said. Did it ever occur to you that you're a bastard? He said, it has occurred to me, yes. Tommy was preparing to leave for his second year at the Groton School for Boys in Massachusetts. Dan always felt uneasy in his presence, a sense of strangeness and inferiority. In all truth, he had seen little of the boy during the past 5 years, and almost nothing of him during the past year when he had been away at school. Now Dan stood in his room awkwardly. Tommy said, Time to go, Dad? Dan said, Almost. I want to talk to you about the flask of bootleg booze your mother found in your room. Tommy said, Mom threw it away. Dan said, Don't you think you're a little young to drink that rot gut? You're not even 16 yet. Tommy said, I don't drink that much. All the fellows carry a flask, so I had one. So what?
So what?
So
do something
what?
about it.
Dan said, You don't see anything wrong with it. Well, I do. I think it stinks. Tommy said, "You would." Dan said, "What do you mean by that?" Tommy said, "Only that your notions of morality are most peculiar." "I would still like to know what you mean."
I think you know, Dan.
Tommy said, "That's all I'm gonna say." Dan got mad and said, "God damn it, when I ask you a question, I expect an answer. Don't tell me that's all you're going to say. I happen to be your father." Now, Tommy raised his voice. "I should be grateful for that damn flask. Without it, a year could go by and you wouldn't speak to me. When did you last talk to me about anything?
Yep.
Why don't you ever tell me I do something right? Why don't you tell me it makes a difference if I'm alive or dead? Because it doesn't make a difference, not to you." Shaken by the outburst, Dan stared at his son, frozen. He wanted to step forward and embrace Tommy. He wanted to find the right words to let Tommy know how much he loved him, but he couldn't. He turned and left the room.
Wrong move,
It's
Dan.
so frustrating. Just say it.
Just fucking say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thomas Selden had aged quickly in the years since his wife's death.
Oh, yeah.
He walked slowly and carefully and was often forgetful. Dan helped Thomas into the club's dining room where they were meeting Mark for a lunch meeting. Dan and Mark were meeting with Thomas to discuss another business venture.
Jesus Christ.
Airplanes.
We're still on it, huh?
They had drawn up the plans to purchase 2 airport hangars along with 5 planes and hoped to expand as time went on. Thomas was not sure about airplanes and their safety and doubted that anyone would even use airplanes for travel. Mark and Dan needed $1.5 million to get the ball rolling. Thomas said,
Better than 15.
"Yeah, I'm not complaining about how you run things, but how much are you going to run? 3 ocean liners, the store here, the hotel in Hawaii. You say you've put all this down on paper? Let me study it and think about it." After their meeting, Mark and Dan discussed Mark's uncertainty about hanging their whole enterprise on bank loans with just one bank. Mark explained to Dan that their attorney, Sam Goldberg, recommended issuing stock of their company into the New York Stock Exchange. Mark said they could keep 50% of the shares and sell the rest of the shares. They would still have control of the company, and the shares could double or triple in a matter of months or even weeks.
Don't like that gamble.
No. And I don't understand stock stuff.
No. I know when it's up, it's good. And when it's down, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Like I know people purchase the stock in a company, and then I don't know what happens.
And then it's a mystery.
Yeah. They can sell it. They can buy it and sell it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how they make the money off of it. Dan refuses, saying it's their company and he doesn't want to hand it over to the public. Mark assures him that they aren't relinquishing any control of the company if they keep a certain percentage. Dan said, "Mark, I just don't like it." And Mark said, "Do you realize that we pay Selden $1 million a year in interest just for the use of his money? Now, what sense does that make? And suppose he should call his loans." Dan said, "Hell, if he calls, we cover it somewhere else. I'm not worried about that. The old man likes me." Mark said, "Will you at least give it some thought? Will you at least meet with Goldberg and listen to what he has to say?" Dan said, "I'll listen. Why not?" In Los Angeles, Feng Wu went out day after day, week after week, looking for work. He was skilled and he was educated. He knew more about the management of a business than most of the businessmen in LA, and more about accounting than most certified public accountants. But in the city of Los Angeles, in the year 1928, there were only 3 kinds of jobs open to Orientals. They could be gardeners, they could clean latrines, or they could work in the kitchen of a restaurant. This, at least,
Lame.
was the knowledge he had accumulated in his search. Each evening, he returned home more defeated, more hopeless, until one day he announced to his family that he had found a job. "What kind of job?" Mei Ling asked. Feng Wu said, "It's a job. What does it matter so long as I work?" Mei Ling said, "Because we are not starving. We have enough money. We have savings. So tell me, father, what kind of job is this?" He said, "The dignity is in the worker, not the job. The job is to wash dishes in a Chinese restaurant." Mei Ling cried, "No, No, you will not, he said. My dear daughter, when I was a young man, before I met Daniel Levet, and you were a little child, I did work that you would consider unspeakable. I cleaned toilets, I shined shoes, I picked up the droppings of cart horses and sold them to a fertilizer company.
Ew.
No one in Los Angeles will accept the services of a Chinese bookkeeper or accountant at any price, not even if I offered to work for nothing. To wash dishes is decent and honorable labor, and at least I can hold my head up. The day after her father announced this new occupation, Mei Ling decided upon a course of action. This was very much in the nature of Mei Ling. She was not a victim. During all her years with Dan, she had acted out of her own will and desire and out of love for a man. When the situation began to take its toll on her child, she had changed the situation. Now, she went to see her boss, the head librarian. She informed him that nowhere in the library was there an English version of the writing of either Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi.
Ooh, beautiful.
Are they important? He asked. She said, as philosophers, they are as important to Chinese thought as Plato and Aristotle are to Western thought. Her boss said, then by all means we should order the books. Mei Ling said, we can't. English translations simply don't exist. He said,
very nice, Mei Ling.
Then I don't see what we can do about it. And she said, the problem is that there is simply no way for a student to approach China historically without these books. They are not very long. Certainly we can afford to have this work translated, and then if we mimeographed even 100 copies, we would have a veritable treasure trove, something that exists in no other university in America. Think of the distinction it would bring upon the library.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Her boss was now very interested in the notion and asked if she was able to do it. She said, good gracious, no. I can read Mandarin, but a proper scholarly translation, no, not in 1,000 years. But I know someone who could do it. And she convinced him to hire her father, telling him that her father was a retired writer and he might be able to help them out if he puts everything else aside. Her plan worked, and her boss asked when he could meet Feng Wu.
Very nice.
Yes. At dinner that night, Mei Ling said, I agree with you concerning the dignity of labor. Feng Wu said, I don't care to discuss it, but obviously you want to say something. Say it. She said, my boss at the library, Mr. Vance, would like to see you tomorrow. I made a date for you to have lunch with him. Feng Wu said, you did what? She smiled sweetly and said, please do not be angry with me, honorable father. I made a date for you to have lunch with him. Feng Wu said, stop using Hollywood Chinese. She said, I'll tell you the entire story, and perhaps you'll be very angry at what I did, but please hear all of it. She told everyone what she had told her boss.
What'd you tell him?
Everyone, everything. Feng Wu was not happy. He said to Joseph, Lao Tzu means the old philosopher or the old man of wisdom, depending on how you translate it. We must spend more time on the language. We are not ignorant people in our family, but at the same time, he turned to Mei Ling, we are not scholars. How could you dare to presume that anyone like myself could translate Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi? She said, because you can. So Toy had been listening intently, following the English with great attention. Now she broke the long silence, speaking angrily in Shanghainese. I am only a woman, and as a woman, I have been silent about things that do not ask for silence. Too long. I have watched this idiocy of my husband washing dishes in a worthless restaurant, and I have said nothing. It would appear that the only wisdom in this family has been granted to the women. Your daughter did a wonderful thing. You will not refuse. You will write this book, and you will stop being pig-headed and stupid. After a long silence, Feng Wu said to his daughter, will you help me? She said, if I can. My Mandarin is not terribly good. He said, I shall have to go to the restaurant in the morning and tell them I'm leaving. Then I will come and have lunch with Mr. Vance.
Boom. Done did it. I want one. Is it
It's refreshing? Refreshing water.
Oh. It's good.
Gregory.
Whoa,
Gregory. Pastor had finished both paintings of Jean. Remember, he painted her nude.
Yeah, nudie nudes.
Mm-hmm. The first, a portrait of her in a blue Grecian gown, and the second, a nude.
A nude.
Pastor had fleshed out her breasts and hips, bent her head forward so that her features were unrecognizable behind a wave of her fine honey-colored hair, and laid one hand provocatively on the pubic tuft.
That's funny.
She asked him how much he wanted for the paintings, and he said, "You, or $3,000.
That's all she's worth.
"What are you talking about?" He said, "Become my mistress for 1 month, and it's yours, free. Otherwise, 3,000 clams." She said,
"Smackaroos." Give them to me.
In other words, if the price is right, any woman is a whore. You don't appeal to me that way, Gregory. And you don't bathe.
Also
that.
There's also the matter of the smell.
Yeah.
You haven't thought of the smell.
You bitch. He said, "You are a bitch, you know." She said, "Oh, anyway, I want it. Bring both paintings to my home tomorrow. I'll have a check for you." By mid-1928, Dan and Mark's airline was finally ready to open. By that time, even Dan's enormous calm had been splintered. He would get to bed night after night at 2 or 3 in the morning, and then find he was unable to sleep, tossing and turning until sunrise, then getting up and doing it all over again.
That ain't healthy.
No, man. When at last the day came for the opening ceremony, Dan was miserable and exhausted rather than pleased. His children were away at school, but Jean was at the ceremony looking as beautiful as ever and the center of attention, not only for the photographers, but for the mayor, the governor, her father, and her friends. Mark gave a quick speech, and Dan joined the 12 passengers that agreed to be on the first flight.
Man, they're brave.
Mm-hmm. This flight would take the passengers to Los Angeles and bring them back the following day. That night, in his hotel room, Dan tossed and turned, thinking about how he had come from nothing and built himself into an empire, but he still wasn't happy. He was as alone as anyone on the face of the earth. When he woke the next morning, he decided he was going to go see Mei Ling. It had now been 7 months since she'd left San Francisco. He took a cab to the library where he knew she worked. When she saw him, she smiled. They hugged and kissed. Dan asked how Joseph was doing and how her parents were. He asked if she could go somewhere and talk. She told him she'd take an early lunch. It was 10 a.m. and she would go to lunch at 11:30. Then they would have an hour to catch up. Dan waited outside on the steps of the library, basking in his own euphoria, delighting in the sensation of a man of 40 in love with all the excitement and the fervor of a teenage boy. Just to sit there, facing a building which contained her presence, made his life richer than it had been in months.
Dude.
Yeah. At 11:30, she appeared, and they went to a nearby cafe to eat and talk. He commented on the fact that she was as beautiful as ever, and she made fun of him for putting on weight. She told him she read about the airline in the paper, and Joe saw it. Dan said, "God, I miss him. Can I see him, baby, please?" She said, "What will you say to him if you see him, Dan?" "You'll come with your arms filled with presents, but what will you say to him?" He said, "I could tell him I love him." She said, "I don't think he'd believe you, Dan." He said, "Do you believe me when I say I love you more than anything on earth?" She said, "I believe you love me, not more than anything on earth. I think you love the game you're playing more."
It's very apparent, Dan.
Yeah, Dan. Dan said, "I sent you money 4 times. Why did you...
4 whole times.
Why did you always send it back?" She said,
I don't want your pity money.
Mm-hmm. "Because I don't need money, Danny. That's the truth. I need you. I need you because I'm only half alive without you. I've never been with another man."
Half alive, but I've been mostly dead. I try and tell Jewel.
Oh my God. I guess I really never listened to the words.
But you have to sing them. Yeah, it's
I
awful.
only sing chorus, I guess.
Remember when she gets all Kermity? Who will say?
Why did she do that?
I don't know.
Interesting.
Quite the puzzle.
I don't need money, Danny. That's the truth. I need you. I'm only half alive without you.
There it is.
I've never been with another man, and I don't want to. There's only you. And it's been that way since the first time we met. And if this hurts you, I'm selfish enough to want it to hurt. And I'm not going to salve your guilt by taking more money from you. You don't give anything of yourself when you give me money. Dan said, don't be so damned logical. And she said, then what should I do, dear love? I can't be angry at you. I adore you. Dan started telling her that now that his airline is functioning, he could come there 2 or 3 times a week, and soon he'd be able to make the trip even faster. And she yelled at him to stop.
Nope.
Oh, Danny, this is a land where men don't grow up. Don't you understand me? You're not a little boy working out a way to play hooky and not get caught. I love you. I call myself Mrs. Levet. My son is Joseph Levet. And I'm not playing a game. You live with a woman you hate and who hates you. You are the father to my child. That's the whole of it. Come to me whenever you want to, but come to stay. I don't care whether you divorce Jean or not, and I don't even care whether you can marry me or not.
Yes, you do.
Or whether you're the richest man on earth or penniless. But when you come, you have to say to me, Mei Ling, I will not leave you again. Because I'm strong enough for everything else, but not for the leaving, Danny. Not for the leaving.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. All right. Still, we are in 1928. Okay. Mark and Dan met with their lawyer, Sam Goldberg, and his partner, Adam Benchley.
Benchley? That's fun.
Benchley?
Bench. Like Stickly?
Yeah.
New York City, New York State.
That just came out. I didn't even use any thought.
I know. It's great.
Wow.
Brainwash.
Sam explained to them that he and his partner had worked out in detail the public offering of stock for Levy and Levet. Now, I don't fully understand how any of this works, so I'm going to give you the gist of the meeting as far as I understood it. Okay? So the meeting was about how Mark and Dan's enterprise doesn't really make a profit because of all the debt they have to pay on. They essentially kept borrowing and expanding too much too fast that they weren't really making any profit with the businesses.
Okay.
So once they sell their shares of stock to the public, they would have $20 million or so in just cash flow. Sam said they needed to put some of that money away to cover the debt they already have and not acquire any more debt until they can show they can make consistent profit.
Oh, profit.
Another thing they explained to Mark and Dan was that the only way they could continue was if they sold more than 49% of the shares. However, if they sell more shares, they will no longer own their own company privately. It would be a publicly owned corporation, and it would require them to put together a board of directors and release to the public quarterly and annual records of how the business is doing.
Ugh.
Dan.
People are into that.
Yeah.
I don't get it, guys.
Dan actually agreed to this pretty quickly. And Mark
Really?
Yeah. And Mark was reluctant, but went along with Dan.
Is he growing up a little?
A little. Just a little.
Just a baby.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe he's just done.
He's tired.
He doesn't care that much. He's just all right, this guy, I trust you, so whatever you say.
Okay. Don't like that much, though.
Jean left again for England to attend an art auction. No.
Bet she did.
No more abortions.
Oh, okay.
Thomas was at school in Massachusetts, and Barbara was very much a horse girl and spent most of her free time at the very exclusive riding club.
Yes. Did she have a braid?
It doesn't say.
I'm going to say she has a braid.
Okay. While Jean was away, Barbara and Dan shared the house.
Our doctor's a horse girl.
Yeah.
And
I like all those horse
love
pictures.
It. Yeah, she's
They're
the
cute.
best person in the world.
They shared the house with servants. Dan saw his daughter infrequently and salved his guilt with gifts. He bought her a whole horse.
A whole
horse. And had it shipped to the club stables. But Barbara never mentioned it or thanked him until the two of them were in the house at the same time a week later. He had envisioned Barbara throwing her arms around him, thanking him effusively. But the reality was a distant person, properly polite. He wondered how long it had been since they hugged. How could he not remember? He said, "How about the two of us going out to dinner?" Barbara agreed without enthusiasm. In the car, he asked her if she liked Italian food. She said, "If you wish, sure." Dan said, "There's a little place on Jones Street where I eat. It's not very posh, but the pasta is the best in the city." The owner, Gino, welcomed them with delight. Dan introduced Gino to Barbara. And Gino said, "So beautiful, Danny. I welcome you here. Come, here is your papa's favorite table." Barbara was stiff and cold, looking around the little restaurant with distaste. Already,
So
Dan,
she's like her mother.
Yeah, she's like 14.
Looking down her nose at everything.
Yeah. 13
Oh,
or,
so
she's, like,
she's a
14.
teen. Okay, fine. That explains it all.
Dan realized that it had been a mistake to bring her here. When Gino left them, Barbara said, "Why do you let him call you Danny?" Dan said, "Because he's an old friend." Barbara and Dan argued about the upcoming election, and Dan said, "I don't think we should talk politics. There are too many other things to talk about, and I don't think you know enough about this election anyway." She said, "You don't think I know much about anything, do you?" He said, "Now why would you say that?" "Well, why did you bring me here? You think I don't know about this place? Well, I do. This is where you go with your Chinese mistress."
Oops.
Dan said, "How do you know that?" And she said, "Mother told me."
What a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
You should not badmouth the other parent. I don't care how much you hate them.
Yep. Dan closed his eyes and fought to control himself. He said, "I don't intend to discuss that with you. We will eat our dinner here because Gino is an old friend and he would be deeply hurt if we left. There are some things you don't understand." She said, "I'm sure there are."
I can't be mad at her. I can't be mad at her.
She's 14.
She's 14 and her dad's fucking someone else.
Yeah, she doesn't
get it.
get the whole picture.
Yeah.
Thomas Selden died in August of that year of a heart attack. He was 74. On the morning he died, he had complained of severe pain in the chest. The butler went downstairs to call the doctor, and by the time he returned to the bedroom, Selden was dead. Jean was in Europe when this occurred. At the end of the school year, the children met Jean in England, and then they traveled to France, where they stayed in a villa for the month of August. Dan was still at home at Russian Hill when the butler called him with the news. Dan found himself deeply disturbed. Not since the death of his own parents had anything of this sort touched him so sharply. He had, without realizing it, come to rely on Thomas Selden as a father figure. Dan arrived at the Selden mansion and tried to reach Jean. He placed a telephone call, and it was a half hour before the call connected.
Good Lord.
Back in those days.
Yeah, man.
He then spoke to the nanny, who still worked with the family, who informed him that Mrs. Levette was away for the next 3 days on Mr. Horn's yacht. Whoever Mr. Horn was. Horn.
With an E or just
Horn?
Just Horn.
Yeah. Father Templeton, an old friend. What?
Like the mouse, the rat?
Yeah.
Templeton?
Yeah. Whoa.
I like Templeton. He sucks, but I like him.
He's funny. An old friend of the Seldens, who was attached to the Grace Episcopal Cathedral, arrived to the Seldens' home. He asked where Jean was, and Dan told him she was on a yacht in the Mediterranean for the next 3 days before he'd be able to give her the news. Father Templeton asked how long it would be for her and the children to get home. Dan said they wouldn't get home in less than 2 weeks. Father Templeton said, "Well, there's nothing in the canon that forbids us to wait, but I disapprove of such things." The smell. You haven't thought about the smell, you
Keeps
bitch.
coming up.
The body is dead. The soul lives, and we don't foster any worship of the body. If you ask me, 2 weeks is too long. I would suggest that you make arrangements to have the funeral 4 days from today. That will give you a chance to speak to Jean and explain my feelings. Then when she and the children return, we can have a memorial service. However, when Jean finally called from France, Dan wasn't home to answer. Then Jean learned that the funeral was already in progress and became furious. It was, nevertheless, an impressive ceremony as hundreds of the dignitaries of San Francisco turned out to watch Thomas laid to rest. Dan sat with Mark and Tony Casala, millionaires among millionaires. Dan thought about his own death. His mind wandered, and seeking his own salvation in memories of Mei-Ling. Was it only 6 months since he had seen her? Why had he made no attempt to telephone her, to speak to her? Had he decided? Could he live the rest of his life without her, without knowing her, or seeing his son again? There was overtaking him now a gray and awful grief. When Jean returned, she had done with her grief for what it was, and only a cold, dismal anger remained. The moment she was alone with Dan, she shouted, "You bastard! You buried my father without me! What a cheap, dirty revenge!" Dan said, "That's crazy. That's the last thing I ever thought about. We had the funeral because Father Templeton thought it was best. Why don't you ask him?"
He said to wait. Templeton.
They never spoke about the funeral again. A few days later, they gathered for the reading of the will. Thomas left money to his cook. I wrote cook, but I thought it said cock.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, guys.
Sometimes that happens.
To his cook, his maid, and
left you something.
And his butler. The mansion he gave to the Grace Cathedral, all of the possessions in the home, the furnishings, paintings, jewels, etc., went to Jean. To Tommy and Barbara, he left 382,000 shares of stock in the Selden Bank, constituting the majority of such stock to be held in trust for them by their mother Jean until the year 1940, when it shall be divided equally between them. Until that day, Jean Selden shall act as trustee of the income from said stock, with full power to dispose of said income as she deems proper.
All right.
The following day, a memorial service was held for Thomas Selden. The day after that, a meeting of the board of directors was held at the Selden Bank. Jean was invited to be present. During the meeting, after all the men expressed their condolences, Jean said, so Jean had been saying, like, why did you invite me to this meeting? Blah, blah, blah.
When was she saying that?
Like, after they're all like, we're very sorry. We love Thomas Selden. And she's like, you understand that I have all the, like,
power?
The majority of the stock in the bank.
Oh, okay. So she's trying to make a power move?
Yeah.
Okay.
She said, the point being that for the next 12 years, I am the trustee for the majority of the stock in this bank. In so many words, for the next 12 years, I own the Selden Bank. When I came here today, I expected you to take it for granted that I would take my place on this board. One of the board members said, but Mrs. Lovett, we have never had a woman on our board. Indeed, unless I'm greatly mistaken, there has never been a woman on the board of any major bank in this country. She said, I'm sure you are correct. This is 1928. Women exist. They vote. They are in most respects admitted members of the human race. Now, I not only intend to sit on the board of directors, I intend to chair it. If any of you gentlemen have any serious objections to the role I have chosen for myself, I would like to hear them right now.
Boom.
Mm-hmm. They begrudgingly said, no, it's great, yay.
Yay, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
Woo.
Mark's secretary entered Dan's office and told Dan that the Los Angeles police were on the phone. Dan answered, and he was told that Martha, Mark's daughter, died in a car accident. She had intentionally wrecked the car to kill herself. And then Dan had to be the one to give the news to Mark. So she had moved to, and it's in the book, I just left it out. She moved to Hollywood to become an actress. And this guy said he was a director, and she was going to make her a star. And then because she came from Mark and Dan's money, he got a check from her, all this money, and then he disappeared. And so she was very upset and drove her car off something.
Gotcha.
Yeah. On October 24th, 1929, Dan walked into his office at 8:30 in the morning. The phone was already ringing. Dan answered it, and it was Stephen Casala. He said, Dan, have you looked at the tape? Which is the ticker tape.
Oh, okay.
Which showed stocks and their prices. Dan said, I haven't turned the damn thing on. I just stepped into my office. What the devil's going on? Stephen said, there's been a big break in the New York market. The prices are plunging. Dan said, well, it's happened before. Stephen said, not like this.
It's a crash!
20, 30 points on a stock. I'm calling because I don't want you and Mark to panic. This day was named Black Thursday. The New York Times said, stock prices virtually collapsed yesterday, swept downward in the most disastrous trading day in the stock market's history. Billions of dollars in open market values were wiped out as prices crumbled. I don't understand.
I don't get it either, but I know it's bad.
I know it was bad. Sorry, guys.
That's about it.
If you're here for financial advice,
then that's on you.
That's not what you're going to get.
No.
So over the next 2 years, piece by piece, the empire Dan and Mark created began to fall apart. Tons of people had lost a lot of money in the crash, and then people stopped spending money on cruises and air travel. And then a little history. The Great Depression lasted from 1929 to 1939, triggered by the stock market crash.
Yes.
And then there was massive unemployment, drastic drops in production, widespread bank failures, and poverty. And it led to millions losing jobs, homes, and savings.
Yep.
So a lot of the banks had closed their doors or ran out of money due to people panicking and cashing out all of their accounts. Tony and Stephen headed to their bank, and there was a crowd of people out front. Stephen tried to convince his father to close his doors. If they close the doors, then they don't have to give people their money.
Oh.
They can keep the money in the bank and still do business.
Gotcha.
Stay open that way. Bow.
Bow.
Tony continued telling Stephen that they would give people their money in full. He said, is this how I built a name, a reputation? Is this what I am? I take the sweat and blood of a poor working man, and now I say to him, go to hell, you can't have the money you worked for. Tony told Stephen if they had to call their loans, they would. Stephen argued that no one had the money to pay their loans. Stephen called Dan and asked if they could pay any of their loan. And Dan gave Stephen and Tony all the money he had in their safe, which was about $40,000. At 2 o'clock, Tony's bank closed its doors, all of the money washed out, and it was never to reopen. 3 days later, Tony suffered a major heart attack in his office and died.
Not Tony.
Tony. So far, everyone's dying of heart attacks.
Yeah.
So. It was now the winter of 1930, and Dan entered Mark's office. One of the board members from Selden Bank was there. Mark said, we've been talking about our credit line. Mr. Clancy is troubled by our delinquency. Dan said, it's only 18 days late. Mr. Clancy said, and what about the next 18 days? Dan said, if you're asking if we can pay the $1.5 million payment, we can't. Mark asked Mr. Clancy for a moratorium. Do you know what that is?
Is that like a deferment?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's a postponement of payment. I didn't know since you were in the bank biz.
I'm a part-time teller.
Part-time model. They argued some, and Mr. Clancy said he would take it up with the board. Jean called and asked Dan if he wanted to meet for lunch, and Dan agreed. Before he met with her, he told Mark about the invitation and asked what he thought it might mean. Dan said he hadn't seen her or talked to her for 3 months. They were wondering if she was going to call in the loan of $16 million they owed to the Selden Bank, which if they did that would end their corporation altogether because they would have to liquidate all their assets. Mark said that maybe it was meant to be if she did. They had a good run, and they had stuck together for 20 years. Dan met with Jean in her office. She told him she was sorry to hear about Tony's death. They discussed the past, and then she told him. Then she told him that the Selden Bank was calling the loans. Jean told Dan that he could sell the ocean liners to Whittier and surrender the rest of the enterprise to the bank in order to cover the loans. She said, I don't want to destroy you, Dan. I want to make it possible for you to live. I'm asking you to stay on to manage the company. We'll pay you well, $40,000 a year to start. Dan said, and what about Mark? She said, you can hire him if you see fit. Dan gave a long explanation about why he built his businesses and said, the fun was in the game. I was a kid. You were part of the game. And Nob Hill was part of the game. And the people I played against were the high and mighty. But the game's over. Somewhere along the road I grew up. Maybe not entirely, but sort of. Jean, I swear to God that I appreciate what you tried to do today, but I don't want to manage any goddamn company. I survived this far because I had Mark and Feng Wu holding things together. No, I don't want it, but thank you. Jean said, and that's your last word?
Don't want it.
I don't want it. Dan said, yes. She said, I won't contest the divorce. Now they discussed needing to meet with lawyers to decide who gets what, and Dan told her she could have the house. He didn't want it. She asked about custody and visitation of the children. Dan said, if the kids should ever want to see me, I don't think you'd stand in my way, would you? She said, no, I wouldn't. He said, then let it go at that, Jean. Jean said, you're not for me, Danny, but you are a hell of a guy. After everything was over and done with the L&L Corporation, Dan had $120 in his pocket. He stayed with Mark and Sarah for a couple of days, and then one day, Dan bought a one-way bus ticket to Los Angeles.
Attaboy. But then I would be like, oh, so you come to me after everything fucking falls apart?
Yeah.
Could you let that go? And be with them?
We'll discuss this in a little bit when you know what happens.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Jesus Christ. Like you think you know.
But you have no idea.
6 months later, Dan walked out of the city jail. He had spent 90 days for resisting arrest. The only possessions he had now were the clothes on his back. It had been 2 years since he had spoken to Mei Ling, and when he arrived in Los Angeles, he convinced himself that he needed to find a job first. Now, once he was out of jail, he went on foot towards San Pedro to where the fishing boats were, since that was his trade. He came across hundreds of jobless, homeless men that sat around fires, and Dan joined them, and for the next several days he struggled with finding food or a job.
That sucks.
Another 24 hours without food, and he would start staggering. He sat at the pier, beaten and hopeless, and then someone called his name. It was an old employee of his, one of his old fleet captains named Pete Lomas. After a lot of stubbornness from Dan, Pete took Dan and fed him and offered him a job on his own fishing line. Dan said, I'm not looking for charity. Pete said, shit, your hands will be bleeding and your back broken the first day out, so don't give me no crap about charity. I got respect for you, Dan, so I'm not feeding you any bullshit. Dan accepted the job. Mark ended up dying after having a heart attack.
Damn, guys.
I know. They had not heard from Dan since he left. Sarah told Jacob to try and find Mei Ling in Los Angeles to see if she knew where Dan was to give him the news. She didn't want to bury Mark without Dan there, but no one knew that Mei Ling had taken the last name Levette, and there was no Feng Wu listed in the telephone books.
Yeah.
6 weeks after Dan started working for Pete Lomas, he decided it was time to see Mei Ling. It had now been 3 years since he had spoken to her. Joseph would be 14 by now. Dan went to the library and waited outside. At 4:30, she came out of the library and saw him. She walked to him and put her hand on his cheek. He sat down on the ground and wept and sobbed. She sat with him, and for almost 10 minutes she was silent while he cried. Finally, she said, "I thought you were dead. It was like being dead myself when I read what happened to the company, and I waited, and then I telephoned Stephen Casala, and he said that you had disappeared, and Mark had died." Dan said, "Mark died? What? When?" She said, 4 months ago, I guess. He had a heart attack. Dan said, "I didn't know. Poor Sarah." "God, you're not married, are you?" She said. "Who would marry me, Danny?" He was smiling and crying and said, "I got a job. I'm a fisherman again. I don't know why I'm doing this. God almighty, I can't sit here crying." She said, "Come home with me, Danny." They walked hand in hand home to Mei Ling's house. Dan asked if Joseph remembered him. She said, "Of course he remembers you. It's only been 5 years." Dan said, "What about your father?" She said, "Danny, he worships the ground you walk on. Don't you know that?" Dan said, "I've never been so scared in my life." When Feng Wu saw Dan, he said, "Mr. Levette, what a pleasure. What an unexpected pleasure. I welcome you to our poor home." Mei Ling took Dan's hand and led him to Joseph's room and knocked. When Joseph saw Dan, he stood up. He was almost as tall as Dan now, with oversized hands and feet.
Like a puppy.
Joseph said, "I don't know what to say." Dan said, "Neither do I." Joseph said, "I missed you." Dan said, "I've missed you. You've grown." Joseph nodded. Dan said, "I don't know what you feel about me. It's no use saying I'm sorry, but I am. I'm sorry. I should have been with you." Joseph sat back down on his bed, and Mei Ling and Dan left the room. Dan said, "He hates me." Mei Ling said, "Oh, Danny. He has a scrapbook filled with pictures of you out of magazines and newspapers. He doesn't hate you. Give it time." I knew it.
You're such a bitch.
Sorry.
They haven't dropped.
During dinner, Mei Ling refused to participate in the silence. She launched into the story of her and Dan's first encounter and started giggling. Joseph had never seen his mother quite like this. Dan talked about his current job as a fisherman and what it was like out on the sea. Joseph let himself be swept into the man's words. He would remember this night all his life, the great sunburned man who was his father, who had ruled the ships that sailed the seas. Dan and Mei Ling were married at City Hall with Feng Wu, So Toy, and a silent, happy 14-year-old boy as the wedding party. In December of 1933, Dan drove home from work. Mei Ling met him outside. She said, "Wait, Danny, there's someone inside. Your daughter, Barbara." "No," he said. Mei Ling said, "Just think about it a moment. She's on her Christmas vacation from college, and she came down here by herself to see you. She's inside. She's very nervous and frightened. Now, if you want to, you can go in through the kitchen door and wash up there. I'll bring you some fresh clothes."
Oh.
Inside, once Dan had cleaned up and changed, Mei Ling said, "Go in alone. I'll wait here." Dan walked into the living room, and Barbara, now 19, stood tall and slender. He reached out his arms, and she ran to him and hugged him. She said, "Daddy, I'm so sorry." He said, "No, baby, there's nothing to be sorry for." She said, "I missed you. I missed you so much." All he could say was, "Thank you, darling. Thank you." The end.
She called it. She said I was going to cry, and here we are, guys. Here we are. Damn it, Howard.
Sorry.
Howard. I imagine I'd be a sobbing mess if I was actually reading it.
I think I teared up at the end.
It's just so lovely.
My
eyes are burning, though, because of my eye makeup.
Oh, sorry. There was one part in there, like when Jean and Dan got divorced and Barbara found out, she was very upset, and Jean was like, well, you know this was coming. We haven't, obviously, things haven't been great.
Yeah.
And then Barbara wanted to talk to Dan to see if he was okay, but didn't know
where he was,
and she was like reluctant to try and reach out. And then in the second book, they have a really good relationship.
Good.
And it talks a lot about Barbara's story and Joseph's story. And
okay. Cute. I liked it. A little too much breast and flower and tuft talk. Mounds.
Too much tuft.
Too much TFT.
Too much tuft. Ooh. What did you say?
Tuftomite.
Instead
of dynamite.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. That was good. Would you take him back?
Ooh.
I read that all your shit came, like, how she said, I read about it in the paper.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and then you waited and he didn't come.
Mm-hmm.
I might forgive him if there was, because he waited and because he found a job first, I might forgive him.
Okay. Not just like as soon as the shit hits the fan,
then he comes crawling back. Yeah.
I think that would bother me.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I'm like, you could have came here 2 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And you didn't.
So where the fuck were you?
I think she's a better person than I would be.
She clearly is. I mean, me too, but.
And then I know Jean's a bitch, but I do like how
she's got spunk.
She handles her business.
She does handle her business, but I would not want to be friends with the woman.
No, I don't think she's got a lot of friends.
No.
Well,
how many ships do you give it?
Ooh, how many ships? I will say 7.
Okay.
Just because of how it's written and the jumping, like, and this one specifically, there wasn't even chapters. It was like
just like breaks in the page. That is some small writing.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then there's one part where it talks about Jacob and he marries Claire. Then they get a winery going, and there's like way too many pages about how to make wine.
Yeah, he's just showing off that he did some research.
And I was like, this isn't necessary.
I don't need to know that.
So yeah, but I did like the story. It felt like a soap opera or something. I needed to know what happened next to the people.
I'd probably give it a 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From hearing it, did I say that already?
I don't know, but now I heard you.
You know it.
Yeah. I heard it. Okay. And next week we will be doing, what's the name of yours?
The Inheritance Games.
That's right. They inherit something, and then there's games. Is that right?
Something like that.
Okay.
You really want to know?
No, I don't want to. I don't really want to know much about it.
Okay, well then I will be quiet.
I like to hear about it as we go.
Okay. Then I won't say shit.
Good.
But, okay, I won't say it. It's hard for me not to talk about it.
We'll save it.
Fine, I'll save it.
Yeah, you will.
Okay.
Well, thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks.
Hope you enjoyed that or whatever.
We love you. Follow us on all the social medias and interact and shit.
Yeah.
Please.
I mean, even if you want to be mean, I'll probably delete it because I don't like that kind of negativity.
We don't need those vibes
in my life.
We don't.
But yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. Love you. Bye.
Bye.